Hi guys, let's go. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm the cat gardener. My name is Diana and I have a small urban garden in St. Louis, which is zone 7A. I post videos about maximizing small garden space in order to get abundant harvests. If you're new to my channel, hit the subscribe button down below to get updates. A few weeks ago, I did a tier list ranking the best things to grow if you want to save money on groceries. You might say, well, that's all well and good, but what about the cost of getting a garden going or the maintenance costs associated with it? I mean, if there's the upfront cost of gear and infrastructure to start a garden, as well as the maintenance costs of like fertilizer, how are you actually saving money by growing your own food? Yes, I admit that when I did the tier list, it didn't take into account the costs of starting a garden, like the cost of compost, soil, raised beds. That can all add up, especially when you're just starting out. My response to that, however, is don't sweat these things. We're not gearheads trying to get like state-of-the-art electronic equipment. This is gardening after all, the most basic and natural thing that we can do with our hands. Soil, seeds, water, and light are the only essential things you need to be successful at gardening. I've seen people who want really beautiful gardens with expensive wood and fancy trellises that make their gardens look like paradises. And they go out of their way to pay companies tens of thousands of dollars to build these. And no offense to people who choose that, but I'm here to tell you that you don't need that fancy stuff. So today I'm going to give you guys tips to start a garden or maintain the one that you already have with inexpensive but effective methods. So let's start with the beds. Where are we actually going to plant our stuff? Metal raised beds that are made of steel are incredibly durable, but each one can be a few $100s, so they can be a little bit expensive when you add a bunch of them up. And wooden raised beds, they are cheaper, but they take a little bit of effort if you want to construct your own. So my advice is to start small. And let me tell you how I started small. I began my garden journey about 6 years ago using like just a whiskey barrel. And in the barrel, I only grew a tomato, a pepper, and an onion, and that was it. That was one season. I didn't get a whole lot of harvest from that one barrel, but it was a good start. It taught me how to garden, at least the basics of it. And it allowed me to get comfortable with gardening without spending a whole lot of money on the infrastructure. So when I decided it was time to expand, I naturally expanded into the in-ground spaces that were already carved out, that were lining the perimeter of my fence of my backyard. I didn't even have to do raised beds right away. Now the downside of using in-ground soil is that it depends on what kind of soil you have naturally in your area. Here, it's very clay-like. In other areas, like Florida, it's incredibly sandy, so you have to amend the soil. So one of the first things I did was set up composting at home, and that allowed me to amend the clay in the in-ground spaces over time. And after I got the hang of gardening in the in-ground spaces, I decided it was time to expand yet again. And slowly, I had 3 raised beds built. Making raised bed out of wood is cheaper than using raised beds made of steel. The wood is not going to be as durable as the metal, but so far, my 3 raised beds have stood up well to the harsh climate here. Next, let's talk about trellises and fencing, because if you have a small garden like I do, it's really important to do vertical growing because you don't have a lot of space for your plants to sprawl out. Now, metal trellises, just like metal raised beds, can be expensive, but guess what? You actually don't need these expensive metal trellises. You can actually do a lot with bamboo. Bamboo is one of the sturdiest nature-made things that we have. In fact, there are places in the world where they do scaffolding with bamboo for construction projects. For a lot of my vertical growing, I use bamboo stakes. In fact, I got all of my bamboo stakes for free at this plant sale that a local landscaping company was doing because they were trying to get rid of inventory. There's a lot you can do with bamboo that's tied to a fence. Like in my garden, I have a bunch of bamboo stakes just resting over my fence for support. And then I can grow stuff like tomatoes, indeterminate ones, along that bamboo just by tying the tomato vine to the bamboo for support. And having these 8-foot long bamboo stakes allows me to get incredible growth with the tomato vines. In fact, I've even heard of people who use the stalks of sunflowers because they're incredibly thick and they dry them out just to get all the moisture. And then you get something really sturdy, just like the bamboo stakes. Additionally, if you're not ready to buy metal trellises, trellises, get wooden ones instead. They're a lot cheaper. I've gotten cheap wooden trellises from garden centers, big box stores, and though they are not as durable as metal trellises, they've been fine. Like, they've held up even though we get tornadoes here all the time. And lastly, you can always make your own cheap trellis. All you need is cattle panel and T-posts, and you can make a beautiful arch trellis. Oh, and I totally have to plug Facebook Marketplace, because on Marketplace is where I found these beautiful vintage fences. They're made of steel, super durable. They don't make these things anymore, or if they do, they're gonna cost a lot. But this was from like a lady who was just trying to move, and she was selling them for like $10 a piece. And these pieces were huge. They were like 8 foot by 3 foot. And I wasn't even sure if I could bring them home. I don't have an SUV or a truck or anything, but I got lucky. She lived very close to me, so I was able to just transport these huge fences in the trunk of my sedan with the top of the trunk open. Now let's talk about soil. So the very first thing and the best thing you should do to get your garden started on a good footing is start your own compost. If you don't have the space for a compost pile, that's fine. I don't either. So that's why I ended up buying 2 compost tumblers, which don't take any space but are very efficient at making compost. But you'll soon realize that homemade compost is not going to be enough, and you're going to need to supplement it. So where are you going to get the extra compost? First off, you should see if your city offers like free compost. If I go to my city's website, I can see that there are a bunch of parks near me that have free compost piles. So all I have to do is go there with buckets inside my little sedan and grab a bunch of compost. And of course, I see people there with their trucks, and they're able to get tons of it at a time. Also, you can check out Facebook Marketplace, because there are people who sell their compost because they have like manure or they have like chickens, so they have a lot of compost that they are selling. However you get your compost, know that anything is cheaper than getting it in a bag in like a garden center or a big box store. Like, you can even get compost delivered to your house. You would have to buy it in bulk, but even that would be cheaper than getting bags of it at the store. By the way, you'll realize that you go through compost very quickly. So when you're filling the raised beds with compost, you'll realize that the cost of compost does indeed add up. So one recommendation is to not fill it entirely with compost. So you can kind of mix like a bit of topsoil with your compost. And additionally, you can also line the bottom of your raised beds with cardboard, wood chips, leaves, just to kind of like fluff up the volume a little bit so that you don't have to fill it 100% with compost. And then finally, for potting soil, like if you do a lot of container gardening, you realize that you go through a lot of potting soil. A lot of the cheap commercially available potting soils, that's just made of like mostly peat anyway, so you're kind of getting ripped off. You might as well just make your own potting soil. Basically, it's just a combination of peat, compost, and something to aerate it with, like vermiculite or perlite. Now let's move on to mulch. Admittedly, I didn't always do mulch in the past, but I realized I was hurting myself because it means that you have to water less. It means that you're protecting your plants from the heat and the cold. And mulch is one of those things that can get expensive as well. It's like soil. You don't realize how much of it you're actually going to need. So the mulch that you find in bags are expensive. And a lot of that price you're paying is actually just for the aesthetics of it, like the fact that they can dye it black and make it look really beautiful. You don't really need that for a garden that you're making vegetables from. And I don't really care about the aesthetics of it. I use wood chips for my mulching purposes, and I really recommend something called Chip Drop, because that's where you can get a free delivery of wood chips to your house. The way it works is that there are tree cutting services all over the city. After they cut their tree, they want a place to deposit the wood chips. This website basically matches these tree cutting services with the customer who wants wood chips. That way you can get like a free drop off of a ton of wood chips. Like the one time I got it, I don't know how much they gave me in terms of like cubic yards. All I know is I got a mountain of it, and luckily I didn't need a ton of it. I was actually trying to kill the grass in my front yard in preparation for putting a native flower garden in, so that grass needed to go before then. But I still had a ton left, and I had to ask my neighbors to take it from me to help out. Another affordable alternative to mulch is straw. I think straw is much more economical. The other thing that I really like about straw is that it's lightweight compared to mulch or wood chips. Like your seedlings of lettuces will not have any trouble pushing through straw, but they might with wood chips and mulch. Another reason why straw is awesome is that it breaks down a lot faster than wood, so it quickly adds nutrients back to the soil. Now let's talk about the actual vegetables and fruits. So it is always more economical to start from seed than to buy transplants at the garden store or the big box store. Seed packets from your major suppliers like Burpee, Johnny's, they're pretty cheap, but I found an even cheaper alternative. So there's a local organization in my city that promotes gardening. They're called Seed St. Louis. I've actually referred to them a bunch in the past, and that's because they're a great resource for us gardeners, not because I'm affiliated with them or anything like that. But they actually have the storefront on their website, and I've checked it out. I've seen like seeds for $1.50, which is cheaper than seeds that you get from major companies. And I wonder if it's because they get them in bulk, so they're able to sell them to us at better prices. Anyway, I also like that they give super local recommendations. Like for these bok choy seeds, they tell you it's like the winner in their bok choy variety trial, and that bok choy generally bolts very quickly in St. Louis, but this is one of the ones that bolted the slowest. Like it didn't bolt until July. This is not the kind of recommendation you're going to get if you buy seeds from a big name seed company. Like they're not going to be able to tell you how it fares in your specific neck of the woods, but this website does. So I encourage you guys to check out your own local resources just like this. This not only saves money in terms of cheaper seeds, but the advice that they give is invaluable. And yet another way to get free seeds is to save your own seeds. One of you guys reached out to me and gave me this great tip that you will never have to buy a radish seed ever again if you just let one plant go to seed. And the commenter told me that you just wait for the head to get so dry that it sounds like a rattle, and at that point you can cut down the stalk, hang it upside down to dry it. And then what you'll find is if you just kind of like brush against these little pods, you will get thousands of seeds popping out. And that commenter also told me the same thing goes for arugula. So I just wanted to share that tip with you guys because I know I'm not the only person who lets like a bunch of radishes or arugulas bolt because summers come on really quickly. And at that point, the radish leaves and the arugula become a little too spicy to eat. So great suggestion to go after the seeds. And along the lines of getting free seeds, and this time you don't even have to put any effort into it, is to use volunteer tomatoes. Every year you'll get tomatoes that fall onto the ground, the seeds go back into the soil, and the next year they will give you volunteer tomato plants. Arguably, you don't even have to plant tomato seeds every year. So if you don't want to do seeds or you got unlucky and the thing you really want to plant hasn't germinated, yeah, go out there and get some transplants from your garden. Something is better than nothing, right? They can be more expensive at the big box stores, but I've always used again, I rely on these local organizations, like nonprofit organizations that tend to have like spring and fall sales, and they usually have better prices on transplants than big box stores. One final money-saving tip I have for plants is to rely on perennials and not just annuals. And that way you're also saving money on time because you don't have to plant seeds every year. And these are things like blackberries, raspberries, pawpaw trees, apple trees, stuff that will keep giving you loads and loads of harvest year after year without you having to budge a finger. So now let's talk about money-saving tips for watering. First of all, everyone should be mulching because that helps to conserve the moisture in the soil, especially when it gets really hot out. So obviously mulching is great, but you're still going to have to water at the end of the day. And there's no free way of watering except if you do rain barrel installations. And rain barrels are awesome. Like they can be as simple as one barrel that collects all the water from your roof and your gutter system. And they can also be super complicated with like multiple barrels all connected to each other. And those can reserve a ton of water. They can be a lot of work to install, but cities like mine may actually give you money to install rain barrels. So we have a small grants program that's managed by the botanical gardens of my city, as well as the sewage department, where they give you like up to $4,000 if you're interested in somehow capturing stormwater drainage in your garden, either by building a rain garden or rain barrels or rain cisterns. They will actually pay you money to do these things because it's a great way to reduce the amount of runoff that goes into the sewage system. So it reduces like the pressure and the load on the sewage system and reduces like the risk of complications happening like sewage overflows. So if you're thinking of building rain barrels and it would cost you a lot of time, effort, and money to get it going, of course the payoff is great, free water, right? But you can maybe just get one of these small grants and they pay up to like $4,000 for each project. So then you can hire like a small business to do it for you. Now let's talk about how to save money on fertilizer. So to be honest, you really don't need to spend a lot of money on fertilizer. And that's because most things don't require it. In fact, I went many years without even fertilizing in my own garden because I used compost, and that was good enough. Here are some of the things that don't require fertilizer, and you really shouldn't add it because if you do, you might really stunt their growth. So beans and peas are nitrogen fixers, meaning they can take nitrogen from the atmosphere, convert it, and release it back into the soil, so they're actually awesome companion plants. Then we have root vegetables like your carrots and your radishes, your beets, and they absolutely do not need fertilizer. In fact, if you add fertilizer to them, they're just gonna grow more of their shoots, like the green parts, instead of the actual roots. So you'll just end up with a very stunted carrot or radish. Same thing with potatoes. They will grow more greens than actual potatoes. And don't even think about adding fertilizer to your lettuce. They're just going to bolt faster if you do. And herbs, bok choy, okra, they really don't need any fertilizer. They prefer a leaner soil. Now we do have some heavy feeders that need fertilizer, so fruiting vegetables like tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants, as well as fruit trees or other things that make fruits like figs. So for these guys, I use a slow release balanced fertilizer, I use bone meal, and I also use fish emulsion. Because these plants represent a small portion of my garden and the rest of them don't need fertilizer, I don't really need to buy fertilizer all that often. And when I do, I just find whatever's on sale. Like I'm not particularly loyal to any kind of specific brand. I just need a combination of slow release fertilizer and instant release stuff like fish emulsion, and that's it. Now let's talk about lowering the cost of pest control. So I don't use pesticide. I only use diatomaceous earth, kaolin clay, and BT, basically keeping it organic. I don't buy them that frequently that they end up being a huge cost, but I will tell you a way to do pest control for free, which is to plant beneficial flowers or beneficial plants that will repel the bugs away. This year, for example, I'm going to do nasturtium for the first time to repel cucumber beetles and squash bugs, but also one of you guys reached out to me. It was the same person who gave me the great advice about the radish seeds, which is to plant a bunch of cinnamon basil. That person said that cinnamon basil is so pungent that it repelled like all of the bugs in their backyard, like cucumber beetles, squash bugs, hornworms, cabbage moths, everything, because it was just so pungent. They could smell it from like many feet away and they would just avoid that garden. Like apparently it tastes really great too. Like you can basically use it as a substitute for Thai basil. And the last thing we'll cover is how to save money on stuff like gardening tools and pots, like little things like that. So gardening tools, you can just get them used on Facebook Marketplace. Like that is such a good resource to get anything used. Like they will be in good condition, but you can get it way cheaper than commercially. And then for pots, just hook up with your local landscaping company. Like they're always getting rid of pots because they're planting stuff. And then as soon as they plant a little plant, they need to get rid of the pot. The same landscaping company where I got a bunch of free bamboo from, they were also getting rid of tons and tons of free pots. So I have like a huge stack of free pots from them. The one thing I will say is it's harder to find like big pots, like the ones that you need for fig growing or pepper growing. So it's way easier to find little pots actually. So I just want to end by saying, if you grow your own food, you may not begin to see savings right away. It may take a while before you build up your skill set and the infrastructure of your garden before you start saving. But I want to remind you that realistically, some of these expensive things to get your gardening started is just a one-time upfront cost. In reality, the maintenance cost to having a garden long-term is low. And I promise you that the initial investments you make will benefit you for a long time to come. That's it for today's video. I'll link everything that I talked about down below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.